The maid was humiliated for wearing an old dress, but when a veteran saw her, he noticed something incredible. The ballroom of the Vanderbilt mansion sparkled under the light of 1,000 crystals. The crème de la crème of Palm Beach mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their jewels gleaming almost as brightly as their rehearsed smiles. At the center of it all, Victoria Vanderbilt, 40, reigned supreme, her designer gown hugging every curve like a second skin. That's when she spotted her. Cindy Mason, 25, stood hesitantly at the entrance to the ballroom. Her dress, a vintage model from the 1960s, stood out like a dandelion in a field of cultivated roses. Victoria felt her blood boil. How dare her maid show up at her charity event? And in that rag? "Richard," she hissed at her husband, "what is she doing here?" Richard Vanderbilt shrugged, uninterested. "Maybe she came to clean the bathrooms?" Victoria didn't laugh. With determined steps, she cut through the crowd towards Cindy. Meanwhile, Cindy felt like a fish out of water. She nervously clutched the small purse that matched her grandmother's dress, her eyes scanning the room for a friendly face. "Cindy Mason." Victoria's sharp voice made her freeze. Cindy slowly turned, facing the furious gaze of her employer. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, how dare you show up here in that old rag?" Victoria spat, her voice rising enough to attract the attention of nearby guests. "Are you trying to steal the spotlight from our guests?" Cindy felt her face burn. "No, I received an invitation. I thought? Victoria laughed, a cold and cruel sound. "Dear, it's obvious that thinking isn't your strong suit. Otherwise, you'd know your place is cleaning bathrooms, not mingling with people of class." Silence fell over the group that now surrounded them. Cindy fought back tears, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, turning to leave. "Wait a moment, young lady." The deep and authoritative voice cut through the tension like a knife. An elderly man, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo, made his way through the onlookers. "Mr. Thompson," Victoria forced a smile, "I didn't know you had arrived." Mr. Thompson, his 75 years marked by the dignity of a decorated veteran, ignored Victoria, his eyes fixed on Cindy's dress. "That dress," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "where did you get it?" Cindy, surprised by the question, replied softly, "It belonged to my grandmother. She was a nurse during the Vietnam War." Mr. Thompson's eyes widened. "What was her name?" "Margaret. Margaret Mason." The ballroom fell into complete silence. Mr. Thompson stepped forward, gently taking Cindy's hand. "My dear," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "your grandmother saved my life during that war. She was wearing this exact dress when she did." Victoria Vanderbilt paled, realizing too late the mistake she had made. As Mr. Thompson guided Cindy to the center of the ballroom, ready to tell her story, Victoria knew that her night of triumph had turned into something very different. What no one knew at that moment was that this was just the beginning. Cindy's vintage dress was about to unearth long-buried secrets, secrets that would forever change the fate of everyone present in that room. A vintage dress, a humiliated maid, and a veteran with a story to tell. What else could this dress reveal? And you, have you ever had a family heirloom that held an incredible story? Share in the comments. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss our stories. Leave your like and get ready for more revelations. 2 hours before the event, Cindy was cleaning Mr. Johnson's house, an old friend of the Vanderbilt family. "Cindy," he said, handing her a golden envelope, "you deserve to be there tonight. Go, have fun." Confused, she opened the envelope, revealing an invitation to the Vanderbilt charity event. "But, Mr. Johnson, I can't." "Yes, you can," he insisted with an enigmatic smile. "Trust me." Without time for explanations, Cindy rushed home, put on the only formal outfit she owned, the dress of her grandmother, and headed to the mansion. Now, standing at the entrance to the ballroom, she felt terribly out of place. Before she could reconsider her decision, Victoria Vanderbilt spotted her. "Cindy Mason." Victoria's sharp voice made her freeze. "How dare you show up here in that old rag? Mr. Thompson gently guided Cindy to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from curious glances and incessant whispers. Victoria Vanderbilt followed, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "I didn't know you knew my maid." The veteran shot a sharp look at Victoria. "I don't know her. But I knew your grandmother, and that is more important than any title or social position." Cindy, still reeling from the events, finally found her voice. "You really knew my grandmother Margaret?" Thompson nodded, his eyes shining with distant memories. "Saigon, 1968. I was a young lieutenant, wounded in an ambush. Your grandmother was the head nurse at the field hospital. She not only saved my life but the lives of dozens of other soldiers." Victoria, feeling she was losing control of the situation, tried to intervene. "What a fascinating story. But surely it's inappropriate to discuss such matters at a charity event." Thompson ignored her. "Cindy, how did you come by that dress?" Cindy took a deep breath, memories flooding her mind. 3 months ago, I was cleaning out my mom's attic. I found an old box with Grandma Margaret's name on it. Inside was this dress and a bunch of letters." "Letters?" Thompson leaned in, intrigued. "Yes, letters she wrote but never sent. They talked about the war, the horrors she witnessed, but also about hope and—" Victoria interrupted brusquely. "This is ridiculous. Cindy, you should be working, not making up stories to impress my guests." But Thompson raised his hand, silencing Victoria. "Please, continue, my young friend." Cindy hesitated, then continued. "There was one letter in particular. It mentioned a soldier she saved, a lieutenant. It said he gave her a medal as thanks." Thompson's eyes widened. With trembling hands, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small box. Upon opening it, he revealed a medal identical to the one described in the letter. "This medal," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I gave to your grandmother that night. She returned it, saying she didn't deserve honors for doing her duty. But to me, she was a hero." Tears welled in Cindy's eyes. "I never knew. Mom rarely talked about Grandma Margaret." Victoria, seeing the situation slip further from her grasp, made one last attempt. "Well, what a touching story. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have other guests to attend to." But Thompson ignored her once more. "Cindy, I'd like to see those letters. They may contain valuable information about that time, about the soldiers your grandmother helped." "Of course," Cindy replied, excited. "I can bring them tomorrow." "Even better," Thompson smiled, "why not come work for my foundation? We could use your help connecting veterans with their lost stories." Victoria gasped. "But she's my employee." Thompson turned to Victoria, his eyes as hard as steel. "Not anymore, Mrs. Vanderbilt. Unless you have any objections?" The challenge in his voice was clear. Victoria, aware of the guest's stares, forced a smile. "Of course not. Cindy is free to do as she wishes." As Victoria walked away, seething with anger, Cindy looked at Thompson, a mix of gratitude and apprehension in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know what to say." The veteran smiled gently. "Say nothing, my young friend. Just know that your dress not only honors your grandmother's memory but may also be the key to uncovering long-forgotten stories." What Cindy didn't know, as she accepted Thompson's offer, was that this vintage dress would not only change her life but also unearth secrets many, including the Vanderbilt family, would prefer to keep buried. The night that had begun with humiliation ended with promise, but the true revelations were yet to come. The morning after the party, Cindy found herself standing in front of the imposing Thompson Foundation for Veterans building. Her heart raced as she clutched the box of her grandmother's letters against her chest. Upon entering the lobby, she was greeted by a warm, smiling middle-aged receptionist. "You must be Cindy," the woman said. "Mr. Thompson is expecting you. 3rd floor, last door on the right." Cindy nodded, grateful, and headed for the elevator. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, she found herself in a hallway filled with black and white photographs from the Vietnam War. Arriving at Thompson's office door, Cindy hesitated for a moment before knocking. "Come in," came the deep voice from the other side. The office was a mix of modernity and history. Thompson sat behind a mahogany desk, surrounded by bookshelves filled with military memorabilia. "Ah, Cindy," he smiled, getting up to greet her. "Welcome. I see you brought the letter." Cindy placed the box on the desk. "Yes, sir. They're all here." Thompson took the first letter with reverence. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to surprise and finally to deep emotion. "Incredible," he murmured. "Your grandmother not only saved lives, she documented stories that could have been lost forever." Cindy watched, fascinated. "Mr. Thompson. Thompson, what exactly do you expect to find in these letters?" The veteran raised his eyes, a determined glint in his gaze. "And perhaps a bit of overdue justice." He picked up another letter and began to read aloud. April 20, 1968. "Today, I received a different patient. Not a soldier, but a young Vietnamese woman. She was pregnant and injured. She whispered something about Americans and a powerful family before passing out. I couldn't save her, but the baby survived. I fear for this child's future." Thompson looked at Cindy, his eyes wide. "Do you know what this means?" Cindy shook her head, confused. This letter, Thompson explained, could be connected to one of the biggest covered-up scandals of the war. Rumors that certain influential American families were involved in questionable activities in Vietnam. A chill ran down Cindy's spine. "But what does this have to do with?" Her voice faltered as a sudden realization hit her. Thompson nodded gravely. "Exactly. The date of this letter is 9 months before Victoria Vanderbilt's birth." The silence that followed was deafening. Cindy felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. "Mr. Thompson," she finally managed to say, "are you suggesting that Victoria Could be the child mentioned in this letter? Yes, it's a possibility we can't ignore. Cindy sank into a nearby chair, her mind spinning with the implications. But if this is true, what do we do now? Thompson stood up, walking over to the window. He gazed out at the city for a long moment before turning back to Cindy. Now, my young friend, we begin to unearth the truth. But I must warn you, this path will not be easy. There are powerful people who will do anything to keep these secrets buried. Cindy looked at the box of letters, then back at Thompson. Despite the fear she felt, there was a growing determination in her eyes. "I'm ready," she said firmly. Thompson smiled, a mix of pride and concern on his face. "Then let's begin. Your grandmother's story, Cindy, may be the key to righting injustices from decades ago." As they both leaned over the letters, delving into the secrets of the past, neither of them realized they were being watched. Across the street, in a dark car, a shadowy figure was taking photos, their phone already dialing a familiar number. The hunt for the truth had begun, and with it, a dangerous journey that would test Cindy's courage and threaten to unravel the foundations of Palm Beach's high society. Victoria Vanderbilt watched the city through the window of her living room, a glass of untouched wine in her hand. The phone rang, breaking the oppressive silence. "Yes," she answered, her voice tense. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, it's Detective Reeves. I have the information you requested." Victoria straightened up. "Speak." "Look at this," Cindy exclaimed. May 10, 1968. The child was taken today. An American couple, wealthy and influential. They said they would give the girl a better life. But I saw the fear in the eyes of the Vietnamese nurse who brought her. Something is wrong. Thompson frowned. This confirms our suspicions. But we need more proof. The phone on the desk rang. Thompson answered, his expression shifting to surprise. "I understand. Thank you for the heads up." He turned to Cindy. "It was an informant. It seems the Vanderbilts are investigating us." Cindy paled. "What do we do now?" "We continue," Thompson replied firmly. "But with caution. Cindy, I need you to do something delicate." "What?" "Go back to working for the Vanderbilts. Pretend nothing has changed. We need eyes and ears inside that house." Cindy hesitated. "I don't know if I can deceive them." Thompson held her hands. "You are stronger than you think. Your grandmother faced horrors in the war. That same blood runs in your veins." That night, Cindy was back at the Vanderbilt mansion, dressed in her cleaning uniform. Victoria greeted her with a fake smile. "Cindy, dear. So good to have you back." "Thank you, Mrs. Vanderbilt. I realized that I made a mistake by leaving." Victoria nodded, satisfied. "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." As she cleaned Richard Vanderbilt's office, Cindy noticed a folder hidden behind some books. Her heart raced as she saw the words, "Operation Silence, Vietnam," written on the cover. Quickly, she took photos with her cell phone. Across town, Thompson received the images. "Good job, Cindy," he murmured. "We're getting closer to the truth." Little did he know that the truth would be more shocking and dangerous than either of them could imagine. The sun had barely risen when Cindy arrived at the Thompson Foundation. The building, usually quiet at that hour, was buzzing with activity. Young volunteers mingled with elderly veterans, creating a surprising contrast. "Cindy, Thompson called, waving her over from a conference room. "Come here, I want to introduce you to someone." As she entered, she immediately noticed a young woman her age sitting at the table. Her blue eyes looked familiar. "This is Amanda," Thompson said. "Amanda Vanderbilt." Cindy froze. "Vanderbilt?" Amanda smiled nervously. "Hi, Cindy. I came to offer help." Thompson explained, "Amanda reached out to us. She suspects something is wrong in her family and wants the truth." Cindy studied Amanda, cautious. "Why should we trust you?" Amanda sighed. "Because I found this." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was an old photo of a young Vietnamese woman who was pregnant. "This is my grandmother," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "The real one." The silence weighed heavily in the room. Cindy looked at Thompson, who nodded gravely. "Amanda," he said gently, "what else do you know?" "Not much. Just whispers, interrupted conversations when I walked into the room. But I know my mother isn't who she says she is." Cindy felt a wave of empathy. "That must be hard." Amanda nodded. "That's why I'm here. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it may be." Thompson stood up. "Well, we have work to do. Cindy, I want you and Amanda to work together. Two different perspectives might be exactly what we need." The two young women exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. Throughout the day, Cindy and Amanda delved into Margaret's letters, connecting dots and uncovering patterns. The initial tension dissipated, replaced by a budding camaraderie. "Look at this," Amanda exclaimed, pointing to a letter. June 15, 1968. The American couple returned. They want more children. They talked about an operation. "I'm afraid of what?" "That's what was written in that folder in your father's office." Amanda paled. "What do you think that means?" Before Cindy could respond, Thompson rushed in. "Girls, we have a problem. Victoria Vanderbilt is here." The two jumped to their feet. Amanda looked panicked. "She can't see me here." Thompson nodded. "Cindy, take Amanda out the back. I'll handle Victoria." As she guided Amanda outside, Cindy could hear Victoria's shrill voice in the lobby. "I know my daughter is here, Thompson. What do you think you're doing?" The door shut behind them, muffling the rest of the discussion. In the alley behind the foundation, Amanda grabbed Cindy's arm. "Thank you. And I'm sorry for how my mother treated you." Cindy smiled gently. "It's not your fault. We're in this together now." As they parted ways, each heading in different directions across the city, Cindy couldn't help but think about how their lives, so different, had intertwined inextricably. The truth was drawing near, and with it, the potential to heal old wounds and forge new connections. But it also carried the risk of destroying everything Amanda knew. The game had changed, and Cindy knew the next steps would be crucial. Thompson's office was enveloped in a tense silence. Cindy, Amanda, and Thompson himself faced a set of documents spread across the table. "It can't be," Amanda murmured, her voice trembling. Thompson sighed heavily. "Unfortunately, the evidence is clear." Cindy picked up one of the papers, reading aloud. "Operation Silence. Transfer of human assets from Vietnam to selected American families." "This is child trafficking?" Amanda covered her face with her hands. "Oh my God, my parents, they were part of this?" Thompson placed a comforting hand on Amanda's shoulder. "Your grandparents, actually. Your parents were very young at the time. A sudden knock on the door startled them. It was Janet, Thompson's secretary. "Sir, Victoria Vanderbilt is her." Before they could react, Victoria burst through the door, followed by two men in suits. "Enough of this game, Thompson," she hissed. Her eyes widened when she saw Amanda. "Amanda? What are you doing here?" Amanda stood up, facing her mother. "Finding out the truth. Something you should have told me a long time ago." Victoria paled. "You don't understand. We were protecting you." "Protecting?" Cindy interjected. "Or hiding your crimes?" One of the men stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, I am the attorney for the Vanderbilt family. I demand that you hand over all documents related to this illegal investigation." Thompson stood firm. "Illegal? We are merely seeking the truth about historical events." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Truth? You have no idea what you're getting into. There are secrets that need to remain buried for the sake of everyone." "For whose sake, Mother?" Amanda questioned. "For the separated families? For the children ripped from their mothers?" The second man, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, as your security consultant, I suggest you reconsider. Exposing this now could have serious consequences." Cindy glanced from Victoria to Amanda, then to Thompson. The tension in the air was palpable. Thompson broke the silence. "Victoria, there's no turning back now. The truth always finds a way." Victoria seemed to crumble. "You don't understand. It wasn't just a few children. It was a massive operation. Politicians, businessmen, celebrities, all involved." Amanda stepped closer to her mother. "Then it's time to do the right thing. For once." For a moment, Victoria hesitated. Then, to everyone's surprise, she nodded slowly. "Very well," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I will tell everything. But the consequences will be enormous." As Victoria began her confession, Cindy exchanged a glance with Thompson. They both knew this was due. The truth was coming to light, and with it, a wave of changes that would shake the foundations of society. The legacy of Margaret, Cindy's grandmother, would finally be honored. But the price of the truth would be high, and the lives of everyone present in that room would never be the same. The Thompson Foundation event hall buzzed with activity. Cindy darted from side to side, adjusting mannequins and checking the carefully arranged vintage clothing. "Is everything ready?" Thompson asked, approaching with a nervous smile. Cindy nodded, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "Almost. I still can't believe we're actually doing this." The memory parade, as they called it, was the culmination of weeks of intense work. Clothes donated by veterans and their families, each piece telling a story from the Vietnam War era. Amanda rushed in, carrying a box. "I found some more photos in my family's archives. I think they'll add context to the clothes." The two young women exchanged knowing smiles. In recent weeks, they had become not only allies but friends. On the other side of the hall, Victoria Vanderbilt watched the scene with a mixture of apprehension and admiration. Since her confession, she had become a reluctant but essential collaborator in the project. "I never thought I'd see the day when I'd help expose my own family's secrets," she murmured to Thompson, who joined her. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, Victoria. It's not easy, but it's necessary." The buzz of the arriving crowd filled the air. Journalists, veterans, families, and onlookers began to enter the hall. Cindy stepped up onto the small stage, her heart racing. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Welcome to the Memory Parade. Today, we're not just showcasing clothes. We're telling stories, honoring memories, and, more importantly, revealing long-hidden truths." As the parade began, each model not only displayed a piece of clothing but also carried a photo or document, narrating the story behind the item. A nurse's dress, similar to Margaret's, was presented alongside a photo of a young pregnant Vietnamese woman that Amanda had discovered. This dress, Cindy narrated, belonged to a brave nurse who not only saved lives but also documented a secret operation that changed the fate of countless children. Victoria, seated in the front row, closed her eyes, tears silently streaming down her face. The most impactful moment came when Amanda stepped onto the stage, wearing a suit that belonged to her grandfather. "This suit," she said, her voice steady, "was worn by a man who believed he was doing the right thing but was actually involved in one of the biggest cover-ups in American history." A murmur swept through the audience. Flashes from cameras went off incessantly. At the end of the parade, Thompson joined Cindy and Amanda on stage. "What you saw today is just the tip of the iceberg," he declared. "In the coming weeks, we will be releasing documents and testimonies that will shed light on a dark chapter of our history. It won't be easy, but it's necessary for us to heal old wounds and seek justice for those who were silenced." As the crowd applauded, Cindy looked to the front row. Victoria was standing, applauding with tears in her eyes. Next to her, several elderly veterans were doing the same, many of them emotional as well. In that moment, Cindy felt the weight of her grandmother's legacy. Margaret might never have imagined that her letters would one day lead to this moment of revelation and healing. The parade had ended, but the real journey was just beginning. The revelations that would follow would shake the foundations of American society, bringing to light secrets buried for decades. But for Cindy, Amanda, and everyone involved, there was no turning back. The truth, no matter how painful, would finally come to light. The Capitol auditorium was packed. Senators, journalists, and ordinary citizens crowded together to witness what promised to be one of the most impactful hearings in recent American history. Cindy, sitting between Thompson and Amanda. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a folder containing her grandmother Margaret's letters. The committee chair tapped the gavel, silencing the room. "The hearing on Operation Silence and its implications is now open." Thompson was the first to testify. His voice, firm and clear, echoed through the auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we are about to reveal is not just a scandal. It is a deep wound in our national history, one that needs to be exposed so it can finally heal." As Thompson detailed the findings, Cindy observed the reactions. Some senators looked shocked, others uncomfortable. In the audience, she saw the faces of veterans, some nodding in silent acknowledgement. Victoria Vanderbilt was called next. She walked up to the microphone, head held high despite her visible nervousness. "My name is Victoria Vanderbilt," she began, "and I am here to confess my family's involvement in one of the darkest operations of the Vietnam War." A murmur rippled through TH. Victoria continued, her voice gaining strength. "For decades, we have carried this secret. We believed we were protecting the innocent, but in truth, we were perpetuating an injustice. When it was Cindy's turn, she took a deep breath before stepping up to the microphone. My name is Cindy Mason. My grandmother, Margaret Mason, was a nurse in Vietnam. Her letters, she raised the folder, are the testimony of a courageous woman who refused to remain silent in the face of injustice. Cindy read excerpts from the letters, her voice choked with emotion. When she finished, the silence in the auditorium was palpable. An elderly senator leaned forward. Ms. Mason, is your grandmother still alive? Cindy shook her head. No, sir. She passed away years ago, unaware that her words would one day reach this place. The senator nodded solemnly. Then, on behalf of this committee, I would like to propose that Margaret Mason be posthumously recognized for her courage and integrity. The proposal was met with applause. Tears filled Cindy's eyes, a mix of pride and sadness. The hearing continued for hours. Testimonies from veterans revealed secret documents, shocking confessions. The scope of Operation Silence was greater than anyone had imagined. At the end, the committee chair made an announcement. Based on the evidence presented, this committee recommends a full investigation and the establishment of a compensation fund for the victims and their families. As the session concluded, Cindy, Amanda, and Thompson embraced, exhausted but relieved. We did it, Amanda whispered. Thompson smiled, tears in his eyes. Your grandmother would be proud, Cindy. Very proud. As they left the Capitol, they were met by a crowd. Journalists shouted questions, but what caught Cindy's attention were the faces, veterans, Vietnamese families, ordinary people, all there to witness this historic moment. An elderly man approached Cindy, extending his hand. My daughter. Thank you for bringing the truth to light. Cindy shook his hand, feeling the weight of all the lives affected by this story. As they walked toward the car, Cindy looked up at the Washington sky. The sun was setting, marking the end of a dark chapter and the beginning of a new era of truth and reconciliation. The journey that had begun with a vintage dress at a gala had culminated here, in the heart of American power. And while there was still much work ahead, Cindy knew that her grandmother's legacy was finally complete. What did you think of the story's ending? Did Cindy and her allies do the right thing by exposing the truth, despite all the consequences? Have you ever experienced a situation where a family heirloom revealed a secret from the past? How did you deal with it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective may bring new insights to this complex story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this one. Turn on the notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect, show your support by leaving a like. Every like motivates us to continue bringing stories that make a difference. Remember, history teaches us that the truth, no matter how difficult, is the path to healing and justice. May the lessons of this narrative inspire us to be courageous in our own lives. Until the next story, and don't forget, sometimes, the biggest secrets and deepest truths can be hidden in the most unlikely places. Keep your eyes and heart open.